Hello everyone, this is Jester of Sorts, the writer of Slenderman and the Rake and various other creepypastas, and I'm making a video instead of writing something, because this is the 1-year anniversary of Slenderman and the Rake. Yes, it was 1 full year ago that I wrote that story, and it has been quite a year. I have grown a lot as a writer. I feel like my stories now have gotten way better than the very first Slenderman and the Rake. I've also gotten a lot of people giving such great feedback and enjoying my work, and it's really surreal and amazing, and I love it. And before I say anything else, I would like to thank Gemma Moonstone in particular, as well as everyone that's read my stories, everyone that's giving me support for these stories, everyone that's given me things to write about, like, tips and stuff. And I'd just like to thank all of you, because really, I wouldn't be continuing to write these stories if no one was going to read them. And so, as thanks for this, I'm creating this video, which is going to be a very simple retrospective of the past year, as well as a FAQ at the end. So, I'm just gonna get started by talking about how I came to know creepypasta and write Slenderman and the Rake. Now, back in the summer of 2011, I was sent a link to the Squidward suicide video by my friend, and it got me into creepypasta. I started reading more creepypasta. I quickly ran into Slenderman, as anyone that reads creepypasta would. And this is before Slenderman became mainstream with games like Slender and stuff like that. So, it was a little bit of digging to find it, but it was still pretty easy, because Slenderman has always been one of the most well-known creepypastas. And it wasn't until 2012 that I actually wrote my first story with any creepypasta elements in it, and the story was called The Man Without a Face. I uploaded it to Reddit /r/no sleep, and I wrote it sort of as if it actually happened to me, and it was of course about Slenderman, and it got few people read it, few people liked it, but it wasn't, something that a lot of people seemed to take interest in. Now, I began writing various other creepypastas, which didn't seem to be getting all that much notoriety. Like, I wrote 7 Minutes, I wrote, this one called, Mosh Pit, which was pretty bad. That one, I'm not gonna lie, it was terrible. But I eventually figured, what would happen if two creepypasta monsters fought? And I wrote just that, two creepypasta monsters fighting. Now, the reason I thought this was because I'd watched this really cheesy, funny monster movie. It was like monsters in sort of WWE wrestling style fighting each other, and it was goofy and zany and fun. And I thought, what if I wrote something like that using two popular creepypasta monsters? So, I thought for a little bit, thinking, well, I was obviously going to use Slenderman because I knew a lot about him, but I was thinking, who else should I use? Jeff the Killer, he's pretty well known. Tulpa, because that's my favorite one. Maybe some obscure monster no one would know. Maybe one of my original monsters, and eventually I settled on using the Rake because, well, it's the Rake. The Rake is very opposite of Slenderman. In his stories, he's known to talk to people, he's known to, be fast, be quick, be very obvious with where he is. He's known to be brutal, be cunning, be terrifying for the total opposite reason of Slenderman. Slenderman is scary because, he's always there. He's slow, but still inevitably going to catch you. He sort of has more endurance, and that's what makes him so powerful. And I thought taking such opposites that are still pretty well known and still could live in the same universe because Everyman Hybrid in his video uses the Rake as well as he uses Slenderman. So I thought, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should try writing this. So I wrote it, and it's a terrible story. Really, the first Slenderman and the Rake is possibly one of the worst things I've ever written. But a lot of people liked it, and a lot of people said they thought it was amazing and awesome and so cool, and a lot of people liked the humor that I put into it, referencing other creepypastas a little bit. So, I decided I was going to write a second part after getting such amazing feedback. And so I wrote Slenderman and the Rake Part 2, and that got amazing feedback. But it didn't get as much as the first one. And a lot of people liked it, but not as many as liked the first one. And I really thought that the second story went almost unnoticed, and I thought that really no one had read my story except for these few people on Reddit. And then I go and I Google search Slenderman and the Rake to pull up the story really quick to show one of my friends. And lo and behold, I see a YouTube link to Gemma Moonstone's channel. And it brings me to Slenderman and the Rake, Part 1, narrated by Gemma Moonstone. And that was possibly the most amazing thing I had ever found on the internet. This was someone who had taken interest in my story, had read the story for other people, and posted it online, and it was amazing just to see my story get that much interest, and seeing those thousands of views it got. And then going to the YouTube search bar and searching Slenderman and the Rake and seeing all these people who narrated it. Like, there's gotta be at least 10 different narrations of that story. 2 of them are in Spanish. And it's just wonderful and amazing. And it inspired me to write another part. So I wrote Part 3, then I wrote Part 4, and then I wrote Part 5. And, just recently, I've released Part 6, Slenderman versus the Willowmen, and people have loved it so far. People have loved reading these, and I'm so glad that people have loved reading these, and I'm so glad that I can enjoy writing something, and other people enjoy reading or listening. It's just really wonderful, and, it's hard to explain just how amazing this is. But it's also has its few drawbacks, like, for one, there are always people that are going to say what you do is terrible, and I've met a few of those people, and hearing someone just so ruthlessly tear down something that I put all this time and effort into is horrifying to hear. It's just absolutely terrible. It's the literal opposite of seeing all these fans that I have. But there's always going to be critics, there's always going to be people opposing your work, and it's just wonderful. And just to have people that have read it in general, even if their feedback is negative, I still have that bittersweet feeling of, well, they might not like it, but at least they've read it. And that's really the entire story of Slenderman and the Rake. It's not over, I'm not done writing Slenderman and the Rake, there are plenty of more monsters to use. And there's always going to be more stories that I'm going to write if people want to read them, and if I enjoy writing them. But anyway, I'm going to get on to the Q&A portion of this, which is basically answering more of an FAQ. I'm answering questions that I've heard a lot of people ask me when I talk to them one-on-one, and a lot of people in the YouTube videos ask, and just in general, people ask questions, and I get tired of going and answering them every single time, so let me just go down the list that I have here. The very first one, is Jonah a girl? No. Jonah is not a girl, Jonah is a guy. I could understand how you would think that because, you know, the story is narrated by a girl, but if you read it, Jonah is a guy's name, Jonah is a male character, so I don't understand how it will say things like, you know, boyfriend when describing Jonah and stuff like that, and people still don't catch on that it's a guy. But whatever. I mean, it's not a big deal. Whatever. The second thing that I get asked a lot, and this is something that people more ask me on Omegle than on YouTube videos and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I use Omegle, and I often will run into people who have read my stories on there, and that's always great because I get to talk to someone one-on-one about the stories. And they always ask me where I get my inspiration for writing the story, and I don't know. It's been a year. I forgot. I remember watching the monster fighting movie. I remember thinking, hey, what if these creepypastas fought? But the exact inspiration to write it is kinda lost in my memory. I mean, I've always liked Slenderman, and I've always liked the Rake, and I've always liked those two characters. So, I suppose the inspiration just comes from creepypasta in general, and just reading stories, and listening to Mr. Creepypasta and Creepypasta and Creepypasta Jr. narrating all these stories, and hearing, you know, all these amazing stories, and just thinking, man, I want to write one of those. And then I write it, and it's not nearly as good as any of the other stories I read. But I don't really think it matters what the inspiration is anyway, because I wrote it, and people like it, and trying to remember a year in the past is very difficult for me. Next question that I get a lot is, what's it like being famous? And the short answer is, I'm not famous, what are you, crazy? Because I'm really not famous. I've gotten, at most, 30,000 views on Slenderman and the Rake, and I've gotten a lot of people reading it, yeah, but it's nowhere near famous. A lot of people don't even know that my pen name when I write is Jester of Sorts. A lot of people don't even know who I am. They just know the story. I'm not famous at all. My stories are well known in a subset of the internet. But it is pretty amazing just to have this, just to have the people that actively seek out to read my stories, the fan base of, based on how many views each video gets, roughly 300 people, is still pretty amazing to me, and it's still pretty awesome, and I love it, and it's wonderful, and it's the best thing ever. And it's just great to have people enjoying my work and actively trying to find my work and read it, and it's really amazing. Now, another thing that I get asked a lot is, what is my favorite creepypasta? Psychosis. That is, first and foremost, my favorite creepypasta no matter what. I've always loved it, I always will love it. It's one of the first few I ever read, and it was really an amazing read for me. It was long, it was engaging, and best of all, it was a story that actually creeped me out, which isn't something that's very common for creepypastas, especially now that I write them. Now that I write them, I look at creepypastas more from a critical literary stance, you know, analyzing just how effective the creepypasta was. I don't really get scared by them anymore. But Psychosis, just going back and reading that gives me chills and makes me question reality. And I love how the story is able to make the reader question both the reality of their lives and the reality of the story, and it's very well written, and I love it. It's my favorite. I could read it 100 times over and still love it. Another question I get is, what is my favorite creepypasta monster? And now a lot of people would probably think, oh, obviously it's Slenderman. But my favorite is the Tulpa character. Tulpa, whatever. From the story Tulpa or Tupla. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But in the story, for those of you who have not read it, it's a creature that is manifested from the protagonist's mind. Sort of like an imaginary friend that just comes to life, and it's very creepy because it's a monster created by the character himself that he loses control of, and that character is amazing, and the monster just absolutely, it plays the part of a monster well. It's sadistic, it's creepy, it can shapeshift, it can make you question reality. It's really overall just perfect monster to me. You know, the story is great, the monster is amazing. It's of course not my favorite, but it's really high up there. Now, Slenderman would probably be my third favorite monster, the second one being the Rake. And it seems to a lot of people that read the first two parts, the Rake was their favorite too. Just from the amount of people saying, what are you talking about? The Rake wouldn't be curb stomped like that and killed. Slenderman would totally get destroyed. And a lot of people also seem to think that Jeff is better than Slenderman when they read part 5 and said things like, how could Jeff be killed by Slenderman? Jeff would... Well, not how can Jeff be killed by Slenderman, but how can Jeff be killed in general? How can someone catch Jeff while he's sleeping? He doesn't have eyelids. How can he sleep? Well, I mean, you can sleep with your eyes open. But I got a lot of people criticizing me for part 5, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with people saying, I have a problem with how you wrote this. I don't think this is what would have happened. I think this should have happened. Because I don't want to have just a mindless following of people going, oh yeah, your story is great and wonderful. I'd rather have people that read my story and go, hey, this is a good story, but look at these things that you could have done better. Because I want to grow as a writer. I want to always be getting better and better when I write stories. And I see a lot of the times with teen writers that they write these fanfics or these slash fictions, and reading them is very difficult. Not only for the fact that it's just ridiculous smut that would never happen in the universe of these characters, but also the writing is poor, the description is bad, the characterization is subpar, the choice of words is disturbing in a lot of cases. And then you go and read the comments and people are just like, oh, this is so good, oh my god, this is so hot. And I'm just sitting here like, do you not know what literature is? And I don't want to ever become like that. I don't ever want to have all the comments just saying, oh, this is so perfect, there's no way you could improve this, because there's always a way you can improve something. Everything can be improved. Everything can be improved. Another question that I find myself getting a lot is, will you write more Slenderman and the Rake? Yes. Yes, I will. I will write it as long as people read it. I will write it as long as I have interest in writing it. I feel kind of like Rooster Teeth with the amount of times that people have asked me this. For those of you that don't know, Rooster Teeth makes a series called Red vs. Blue. And it's gotten to the point where they made a website called willyoumake.more.redvsblue.com, or something like that. And it just says, yes. So, I mean, I'm going to continue writing these stories because people like reading them and I like writing them. And I feel like I'm getting better at writing them. Now, another question that I've heard quite a bit is, what monsters are you planning on using in the future? Or people will ask me, will you use X, Y, or Z monster in the future? Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what monsters I'm going to use, though from the ending of Part 6, I'm sure a few of you can guess what I'm going to use for Part 7. But I will tell you characters that I won't use. I'm not going to use any video game creepypasta characters. No Tails doll, no Sonic.exe, no Ben Drowned, no... none of that, no. I don't think that taking these characters that are meant to be in video games or in pictures, like Smile Dog, I'm not going to use Smile Dog either. I don't think taking these characters and making them actual sentient beings, giving them personality, or giving them something that makes them scary, and then having them fight Slenderman would work. And I also don't think it would be respectful to the people that originally wrote the stories, because these stories were originally written with creepy monsters that existed in the computer or in a game console to stay in the game console. I know Tails doll in one of the stories, or in a few of them, comes to life and kills everyone, but those ones aren't that good story-wise to me. And I just feel like if in a video game something is going to be a monster, it would just be disrespectful to the writer to take it out of the video game and make it an actual character that could fight. The same goes with Smile Dog. Smile Dog exists in a picture, and I think it would be disrespectful to the original creator of Smile Dog to say, okay, now I'm going to take the subject of the picture in this story and make it an actual dog that attacks people. But I digress. I'm not going to use those characters. I just don't feel comfortable with doing that. Just like if you read the stories, I try and hold pretty true to how the characters were originally written. The Rake was written to be intelligent and cunning and be super fast and something that's going to, you know, rip you apart brutally. And the Rake certainly tries to do all those things. He's smart, he's intelligent enough to know when someone has these pictures of him. He's intelligent enough to get into the house and start creeping out the people in the house by scratching on the window. With Jeff, a lot of people were upset about the fact that I made him fall asleep. And I did that because in the original Jeff the Killer story, he was a human. And he still is a human. And humans have to sleep. A lot of people also think that me making Slenderman a guardian angel is breaking what Slenderman originally is. But I don't think so, because, you know what? Slenderman isn't one sentient being to me. It's an entire race or species, as you can clearly see from part 2. And I think that's because there are so many different types of Slenderman, and so many different stories, and it's so inconsistent, that it would only make sense if it was meant to be a species. That being said, I don't actually believe in Slenderman, which is another question I get asked a lot. I don't think he's real, he's just a character that I write a lot. And I see a lot of the times people writing things like Jeff the Killer love stories, and it disgusts me because Jeff is not a character that could love. The only people he could love would be Lou and his mom and his dad, who he all mercilessly killed because he was crazy. He's a crazy, psychotic serial killer, not someone who loves people. But I digress. So thank you again, all of you who have read this story, for this wonderful year I've had, and be on the lookout for the next parts.